yeah, we're going to talk about component first builds. And what those are, this is a bit big. What those are basically where your navigator, it's all green. So the page is completely composed of components. And there's lots of different ways of doing this. And just to cover some basics, there's mainly two types of component builds that you can lean towards. The first one is what is often referred to as open components. And this is components that may be elements, it could be layouts, but majority of them have a slot inside of it. So you're nesting components one inside the other. Think of it as a Russian doll, and you kind of like wrap each one of them in a new component. And what that might look like is something like this, where in this case, I have a section, and inside of a section, I have a container, then a row, the content, and then the elements inside of it. And you see how everything kind of slots together. The other option is what is often referred to as closed components. So these are more contained. They sometimes have slots, but more often they have lots of props and variants that you can switch between. And it might be a little bit more client-friendly because you don't have as many nested options in there. Pros and cons to both. And I'm going to do the cliche, raise your hand, if you currently build with component-first systems. We got a few. And keep your hand up if you do the open component way. Okay, so majority that put their hands up actually stayed with open components, which is interesting because I've heard so many different opinions on these. And they both have kind of pros and cons for each one of them. And one thing I want to cover is like, which one do you pick? Do you go fully open components or do you go closed components? And a little bit of insight of how we do it at Code and Wonder is we don't necessarily pick. We work with the client to understand how best we can support them in order for the marketing team or content team or whoever on the client side is managing the site to best support them so that they can own the site. So we look at the design complexity. Do they have lots of repeatable sections? In that case, maybe a closed component build might be best. Or do they have lots of flexibility that they need, and therefore, dragging and dropping lots of components together might be a better fit for the project. But most of all, we look at the marketing or content team skill set. Are they able to work with the system? Are they, do they want the flexibility of open components, and do they understand the system well enough in order to work with it? And sometimes it's yes, sometimes they say, no, we'd rather have less flexibility, but an easier system that we can drag and drop the various sections inside of it. So it's not necessarily kind of black or white. You can only do closed or you can only do open, but also you want to avoid the 50 shades of variance for one component where then it's just paralysis of which one to pick and which one to choose and how is one different from the other. So what we did internally at Code and Wonder, we created a component-first library called Blocks. And Chris, we did a talk over a year ago about this, and it was an early iteration of this before component variants even existed. So it has changed quite a lot, and we continue to iterate because Webflow ships so fast that it's hard to keep track of things, and we try and update it as soon as new releases come out. But the problem that we wanted to solve with Blocks is to have a flexible system that can adapt to any designs, that has built-in consistency so that the client can easily, even if it's open components, drag things in and it will still be on brand. It will still have the correct spacing and the correct colors and everything that forms a design system itself. that follows best practices, so the client doesn't have to think of area labels and SEO and like technical support. Everything is built into the components, so they don't have to worry about that. And most important of all is empowering their team so that the marketing team and the client can really own the site. And then our job is to support them with components and new functionality that they need. So I'm gonna show you how Blocks is built. And the first thing I mentioned is kind of the flexibility. So what we build inside of, can you see, or should I zoom in? It's better? So we built in variables, collections inside of it, so you can quickly find where everything sits. But you might be familiar with kind of the primitives. So these are like the very basics of what your font is, what your colors are, and kind of like the font weights that are set for every single project. But one thing that we wanted to add is the flexibility of designs. So a lot of you, especially if you're on the design side, you might be familiar with the 12-column grid that a lot of designs are based on. But in all the many sites that we worked on, it doesn't always follow the 12 columns. You might have 10, you might have 24. So we built in a system in here that you can change the column count to whatever the design that you're building follows. You can set the maximum width of your container if it has one. You can pick the padding kind of left or right of the content that sits on every page. And this powers what we can hopefully turn on here, these guides. I wish I had a bigger laptop because, wait, let me do. Zooming in and then zooming out, I don't know if it's gonna work, but hopefully you'll be able to see all the different columns in here of your kind of like design grid. And if I go to, you kind of see it. And if you go to here and you say, actually, I want to change this to, I don't know, 15, for example, and you go back to the page, if you can count really quickly, you'll see that there's now like 15 columns in there, and everything still sticks to a set column that you can define still in the column sizes here. But that's the flexibility that we wanted to introduce, is being able to adapt to lots of different designs. You have your column sizes here, so everything is calculated for you. If you have 15, for example, you just add a few more variables in here so that it goes. You have the flexibility of spanning through all of the 15 columns. Just for the purpose of this, let's go back to 12. You then have the different themes. So you might have a base mode and an invert mode, so you can switch between the two. You have your typography settings. So what we do in all of our builds, I don't know if any of you is familiar with fluid typography, which means that if you resize the screen, the typography kind of changes with it, so you don't end up with these awkward sizes of like a small desktop and the typography is huge. And all of that is automatically calculated. All you have to do is set a minimum size in rems and a maximum size in rems, and you're done. This, I don't know if you ever have to set up all of this from scratch, is pretty tedious. So for all of the new builds, this is our boilerplate that we start with, and then we just tweak the amount of headings that we need and add some additional ones if needed. But all of this is meant to be boilerplate that you customize to your needs. So if you have to remove or add things, it's all kind of there. And lastly, for these variables, or kind of like the setting part, is the spacing. So again, you can add and remove spacing. All of these also use fluid sizing as well. And then once you set all of these up, you can start building, basically. So we have sections, and inside of a section goes a container, and then inside of a container, it goes your content. And I guess the way that we build it, I don't know if any of you is familiar with Mast or Loomis. I mean, Mast is probably the most similar to this, where it uses rows and columns. What I wanted to do is kind of move away from that rule that everything has to be inside of a row and everything has to be inside of a column and so forth. Because what if you have something super simple like a container, and then you have this kind of the grid of with an image and text? Why can I not just add a grid, image and text? Why do I have to add columns and so forth? So it's all based on what you need rather than what you have to add in there. And what I call rows basically aligns content horizontally. So in this case, I have a row because I want to align it to the center. And then I have content which aligns the elements vertically. So you have a few variations if you want to align them to top, middle, center, and kind of all the 9-point grid. What the content also does is it has a column span. So you can have it larger and it spans through the columns, or you can have it smaller so that, yeah, more restrained in there. And you basically just build with those, and you can achieve most layouts that you can see here, or even slightly more complex ones. Everything which is inside of those layouts I call elements, or maybe atoms, if you're familiar with the atomic system. And it depends on the client and the design specifically. So we have a few which come with the boilerplate because they're everywhere in every single site. So buttons, links, headings, paragraphs, rich text. We have like a breadcrumb one, some like feature, which is a combination of the icon and the rich text. But everything is kind of here, ready for you to build the new components that that are specific to your site. So these are all open components, right? You're nesting things inside of each other. There's a few pages of the design system where you can kind of document all the layouts. So you have all the different components with the variations of what you can have. So you have your grid, which could have like 2, 3, 4 columns, and you can add to those variants however many you need. You have, rows with all of the different alignments that you can have, and the content with all the different width span that you can have as well. All of this is available as a clonable, so I suggest you could go download it, and I would love your feedback as well in things with that maybe you think are missing or things that you feel like could be improved. Always open to hear your thoughts, and you can just go through all of the different components on these pages as well. One of the things that I guess bringing it back to open and close, can we have a mix? What I often do, especially if I have a client which is less technical or wants a simplified version of it, I would suggest to build component first, so open components, so it's easy for you, it's easy for the developers, and it's easy for maybe the more technical people on the team to build this way, and then simply go to a specific section, and 1 second, I need to move it down here, and then you can wrap it into a div, and then you can create that as a component, and you can, I mean, here it's suggesting 78 properties. That's a bit too much, but you can pick the ones that you want to actually surface for the client. So you might say, you know what, I just want the heading and paragraph to be editable and nothing else. But at least, you know, you have all of these different variations that you as a more technical person or a developer can go in and change that component fairly quickly.
Sorry to interrupt, Alessia.
Yes.
Just quick, the suggestions here, are they based upon props that are already created on the open components, or yeah?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah. So I believe it's a mix of props already created in the open components and potential of things that the AI. Oh, you should add that to the. Where's Jimmy? Add that to the AI list.
Okay.
Things that should be a property as
Yeah,
well.
because it's starting to suggest new properties when you're creating components now.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I think one big shift from my presentation over a year ago on this is previously we at the team, or I specifically, relied a lot on classes. So you often have a component, and I still have it here on like the advanced section. You can still add a custom class and then refer that in custom code if you want to. But the whole idea of blocks is that you never need classes. It's all variance-based and components-based, because I feel like the friction that I found for a client in using any system at all is if they have to memorize classes. They will never do that. No matter how many cheat sheets you build, no matter how time you repeat it to them, it will never happen. So removing that friction and removing that like memorization of classes, and just have it as a drop down of like, okay, how do you want to align this text? That I feel is the big step between the very first version and this version.
And I guess too, it means that they can stay in build mode if they're not dealing with any classes. If everything is a variant or an option or a prop, then build mode is a nice safe place for them.
Yes, so you can build this whole page with all in build mode. Yeah, and because everything is inside of the page slot that we still need, anyone with a limited C, so a build mode or marketeers or like however you name all the roles, they can still use that and build pages, build new pages out of the templates. One last thing maybe, if you do go down the route of open components, what I suggest is creating, I mean, I have two here of like basic layouts, but these will then be customized to the client specifically. If you pre-build all of those sections with open components, they can simply copy and paste it in different pages. So they have all the variations here that they can simply grab and paste it somewhere else.
And I guess too, Alessia, if you're going down that path of using this to set up a bunch of closed components for the client to use build mode, the component library is going to be full of all sorts of things, but then you have a nice tidy system there, I guess, with folders and things.
Yes, good shout. Yes, so everything is grouped by elements, layouts, styling, collections.
How do you stop the client from going into those and sticking to the ones that you've prepared for them?
So I would name them with a prefix. Yeah. So we'll brainstorm that with the client to make it as easy as possible for them. If they come up with the name they'll remember.
Put a 0 in
hopefully.
front of it so it's at the top.
So it could be, yes, and it could be, well, what I always suggest to them is to use Command K to search.
Wow.
So if you then prefix them all with build, for example, and you start typing build, and then you have the list of components that they can pick from.
Nice.
Build is quite long, so picking a shorter one, and it's usually defined with the client so that they're familiar with the naming as well. So the whole component library is more of a collaborative approach, because from the beginning, we decide with them how they want these components to be set up, and then how can they use them easily with the naming convention as well. But that doesn't stop us from using open components to make our life easier, and then our clients as well. I think that's pretty much it for, oh, we got a question.
Yeah, amazing. That's so cool. Hang on, microphone. I'll come round.
How much more efficient has this made you and your team?
Sorry?
How much more efficient has this system made you and your team?
A lot more, because everything stays consistent, first of all. And I think for our team specifically, the biggest time sink in building these is the setup. So, creating all of these variables for all the spacing, all the typography, the theming, and so forth, I feel like that is what takes the most amount of time. So having a boilerplate that has all of those set up and you're just deleting or just adding a few saves a ton of time. But component first builds are not necessarily easier. I would argue that they're harder than non-component first builds, because there's a lot more thought that goes into how things are set up, because the whole aim is to make it easier for clients. So I find open components helps me and the team speed up the build, but there's more time dedicated to the setup rather than just starting to build. I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah.
And then I guess the goal is to make everything on the left side green. So then if you do a bespoke element, then you would componentize it and then fit it into the page slot, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the aim. It's not always possible. I think it's getting
multi-reference, as we learned.
Yeah, multi-reference is still an issue. So if you have a collection and inside of it you're referencing another collection and you want to display those items, it cannot be inside of a component, so you have to unlink them. So that's still a sticky point. Yeah. But now with conditional visibility is getting easier and easier, because now you can set conditional visibility within components, which means that you can use it within CMS collection as well. You can add filtering for properties, so your collection, you can have like one collection for your team section, and then filter those by, I don't know, if you have a developer section and a designer section and so forth, you can have the same component with different filters. So it's getting easier and easier to build purely component first. Still a few quirks that needs to be, looked at by Webflow.
Alessia, the boilerplate, I guess it doesn't come with any, or doesn't need any collections. It's basically what you've shown us.
I think it has two. It has blog categories and blogs, just for me testing most of the time.
Yeah.
But these can be removed fairly easily. And I mean, blogs, most sites have blogs as well. So there's these two that comes with a collection.
More questions, Neville?
So how has this changed? Sorry. How has this changed how you work in Figma, and do you combine it based on this new framework?
Yes. So in Figma, we're much more aware of, spacing and not necessarily componentize everything, because could also be a waste of time because you're not necessarily copy and pasting the components over, but just being mindful of reusing certain elements. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be restrained as a designer. A lot of the time we start not thinking of components and just design, and you do like a few variations of the homepage until you find, what works and what the client likes and kind of agree on a direction that you want to go. And then at that point, we look at, okay, what has been approved and how can we adapt this and create all of the other pages easily with reusing certain aspect of the components. This doesn't mean that it has to be super boring and reusing the sections over and over again. But a client of ours actually put it really, really nicely. And he thinks of the design system as a sandbox. And the system, so all the variables and the components are the edges of the sandbox, keeping the sand in. And then the marketeers and the people using the system are the kids playing with the sand. And I quite like that. Well, that's the thing. You cannot throw sand outside of the box. So you're free to try whatever you want because the components keep you on brand and on track.
Right, so you're saying that the creative process, you still design the sites without this in mind, and then later on you adapt with that. That makes sense.
Yes, because we don't want to be restricted to squares, right?
Guys, we're coming up to time. Is there any last questions? The one down the front. And Alessia, think about the who's going to get the prize for the best question.
Ooh, I haven't been. Yes.
One question.
It was just a quick question. It sounds like the whole process, the build process, is quite collaborative with the client, but I just wondered how much time you have to put aside at the end of the project before launch to work with the client to get them up to speed with using the system.
We always do a training session, but say training session rarely passes the 2 hours.
Right.
So it's like a dedicated 2 hours with the client outlining how everything has been set up. And because we do create those templates and we create those, already put together sections, I find the client is very happy to copy and paste those, delete or add components to it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Very impressive stuff.
We've been using the system on quite a few clients already, and we got really good feedback for it. And you can find more about blocks at codeandwonder.com/blocks, and you'll find the clonable there as well. So feel free to clone, message me. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, if you just search for my name, and just let us know what you think.
Excellent. Thank you very much.